created for changes, chosen for greatness. All things are possible, be all you can be in Christ. Maximize your life, maximize your life. All things are possible, be all you can be in Christ. Maximize your life, maximize your life. All things are possible, be all you can be in Christ.
Good morning and welcome to Maxlife, where we encourage you to maximize your life. My name is Peter and my co-host is
Theodora.
Someone rightly said, if you want to study the fundamentals of leadership, this book is the perfect place to start. And today we want to continue to look at Nehemiah and learn how to overcome challenges, how to maintain courage and focus under fire. The big question often in our journey of life is, what do you do when opposition shows up? What do you do when things become difficult? One of the things we want to look at today is the subject of perseverance. Everyone knows how important it is to persevere. And there's this story I read in the classic by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. It's one of the first books my dad bought for me many years ago. And it's the story of the man who stopped 3 feet from gold. And it's such a powerful illustration of why we must never give up, why we must be tenacious about our vision, about our purpose, about what we have determined and decided to do. 3 Feet from Gold by Napoleon Hill. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was caught by the gold fever in the gold rush days and went west to dig and grow rich. He had never heard that more gold has been mined from the brains of men than has ever been taken from the earth. He staked a claim. He went to work with pick and shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for gold was definite. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded by the discovery of the shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery, had it shipped. Ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of that ore would clear the decks. They will come and big killing. They will come back with big killing in profits. Down went the drills. Up went the hopes of Darby and his uncle. Then something happened. The vein of gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow, and the pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on, desperately trying to pick up the vein again, all to no avail. Finally, they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s, took the train back home. Some junk men are dumb, but not this one. He called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because The owners were not familiar with fault lines. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Dabbys had stopped drilling. That is exactly where it was found. The junk man took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Theodora, perseverance is so important. I can't imagine that story, stopping 3 feet from the ultimate prize, reward for several weeks, and that's how many times people stop just at the brink of their breakthrough. And today we want you to know that you probably have heard of the quote, if you don't succeed at first, try again. Or maybe if you're a Christian, you've probably heard the righteous man falls down 7 times but rise up again. The lesson is, of course, nobody achieves anything great without first overcoming a few obstacles.
I remember our Prime Minister recently. I think she was out of the country and they said there was some inner tussle. And she said, "I'm not a quitter." That was so very admirable. It was also tough, the troubles about the Brexit and internal squabblings and all that. But she said, "I am not a quitter. I'm not giving up." And since then, she's been making steady progress. And that's our present time and the things we can see going on. Indeed, a common saying, which is almost like it's a maxim, which is all over the place, that quitters don't win, winners don't quit. And indeed, from experience, from stories, the darkest hour is always before the dawn. So please be encouraged. Whatever you are pressing into, it's not time to give up yet.
Yeah. Listener, maybe you might be saying, well, it's easy to talk about perseverance, but I'd like to know, truly, to experience failure and then continue undeterred and courageously takes a lot of guts and takes a lot of vision as well. And that's why we are so fascinated about this man, Nehemiah. There are 3 things here about Nehemiah and great leaders. The first thing is they're able to see further than others see. Nehemiah was able to see the problem even though he had never been to Jerusalem personally. But then where he was, he could imagine the solution in his head. We're going to talk a little bit about imagination as we go on as a tool to overcoming challenges. The second thing you find about great leaders, and you find in the life of Nehemiah, was that they see more than others see. And so Nehemiah knew that the wall could and should be rebuilt. I mentioned last week all the valuable reasons why that wall needed to be built. It increased the economic status of that city. It increased the political relevance of that city. And so he knew what it would take to do that job. And before he left Shushan, he asked the king to provide him with letters allowing him to gather materials and grant him safe passage. Number 3, good leaders will see before others see. None of the neighbors around Jerusalem wanted to see the Jews rebuild the wall, and they conspired against Nehemiah and the people. But Nehemiah saw the danger ahead. He refused to give in to the threats and the plots. And when the task was threatened with violence, he devised a strategy to defend the city and to keep the people working at the same time.
Yes, interestingly, as we were talking now, it occurred to me, what would make a man press on in spite of torture, in spite of being incarcerated in prison for 27 years?
Remember Nelson Mandela?
Yes, and still believing in humanity, believing and standing as a leader.
Extraordinary.
What will
Man.
keep a man going like that? It's vision. It's seeing the glory ahead. Just like, now we're celebrating Lent as Christians.
Yes.
That's what kept Jesus going.
Yes.
The glory
And
ahead.
The joy that was
set before him. And for us as individuals, dear listeners, you must persevere, press on to that gold mark. And the joy
Keep
there
the
is.
vision in focus.
Exactly, that's the word. Keep the vision in focus.
The X Factor, Simon Cowell.
Yes.
Simon Cowell, nowadays we know him as a pop icon and a very successful, wealthy man. But what we may not know is some of his backstory and how this man persevered. Because early in life, Simon Cowell faced his own fair share of struggles. Mm-hmm. At the age of 15, he dropped out of school and bounced around several jobs. Eventually landed a small job in the mailroom of EMI Music Publishing. And Cowell began to work his way up to the A&R department and then went on to form his own publishing company, E&S Music. Unfortunately, his company folded up in his first year, and he ended up with a lot of debt and was forced to move back in with his parents. But he never gave up. He never gave up on his dream of working in the music industry. And eventually, he landed a job with a small company called Fanfare Records. He worked there for about 8 years. He helped that company to become a successful label. And from there, Cowell spent years signing talent and working behind the scenes, and then launched the American Idol and X Factor, and the rest is history. And even today, even though he's rich and successful, Cowell continues to work on new projects.
Diligence.
That experience of his early years of pressing on, of refusing to give up, I think helps him still today.
Remember the story of Lord Sugar, of the apprentice. It's almost the same.
Yes. And these are stories. The biographical stories are so important to know, really, the stories of men, and to know that wherever we are not disadvantaged except in our mind. Most of the walls in our life are broken down either by neglect or by fear, through ridicule and sarcasm. The tools that Sanballat and Tobias are tempted to use against Nehemiah, is just to make him feel small. Most true leaders will deal with distraction at one point or another in their progress.
Definitely.
And you need to know these two characters.
Be expected.
Yes, these two characters, Sanballat and Tobias, I introduced them last week. Sanballat was the governor of Samaria, a region to the north of Judah, and he had secret ambitions of his own to become governor of Judah. And his deputy was called Tobias, and together they formed a very formidable team of opposition against Nehemiah, carrying out the vision that he had for Jerusalem. And there were other players too. There was a mix of the Ashdodites. The Ashdodites were actually Philistines, and you have some Arabians there and Ammonites, and there were other tribes from the east. So, listener, I want you to know that attempting to accomplish any major thing in life will require courage.
Yes, at a time like this, when we're talking about courage, building up our walls, as a student, you need courage to press on. That subject may not be the most interesting subject, but then the vision of what you want to become will keep you pressing in, getting the right advice and the right counsel, doing the right revisions, and you'll get there. The same with family life. There are family walls that have been broken, but we don't need to hands off. We can press on. We can rebuild these walls of our family lives and make something glorious out of it. I read a story in the Reader's Digest some years back now about a man who was diagnosed with a terminal disease, and he just chose to laugh it off. He started watching Tom and Jerry. Can you believe that? And he came out of it. So sometimes, dear listeners, you may have to step back, laugh at that situation, and get some clarity in your mind.
It's important to believe in yourself and come at it again. Step back sometimes, in this story that we are looking at of Nehemiah, even as much as Nehemiah tried to keep the morale of the people high, at one point in the story, due to the threats and the opposition and the harassment, the people began to feel discouraged. The task sometimes before us will look impossible. We begin to feel there are too many things working against us. The cure for fatigue and discouragement is refocusing on our purpose. Refocusing, like you said, step back and then refocus. Some of the workers under Nehemiah wanted to quit because they complained of physical exhaustion. But Nehemiah knew that the real purpose was because they were afraid. Fear is such a paralyzing emotion that can easily destabilize us. Nehemiah succeeded by turning the attention of the people to God, who is great and awesome. Fear can only be dealt with by faith, not necessarily faith in ourselves, but faith in God. The progress they had made in such a short time made the Samaritans, the Philistines, the Ammonites, the Arabians, made them so mad. They began to secretly plot to kill some of the workers on the wall and cause confusion. When that plot was leaked to Nehemiah, he took appropriate action. He armed some of the workers, and when the plotters found out that the workers had armed themselves, they were more reluctant to attack. Like John Philpott Curran once said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So we find in Nehemiah, I love this man so much, he constantly combined prayer with preparation. His people trusted God, but at the same time they kept vigilant watch over what had been entrusted to them. Too often we pray without looking for the role God wants us to play in our projects. We show God we are serious when we combine prayer with critical thinking, with preparation, and with effort. I believe that regardless of the opposition that arises against us, we must never forget that each time we move forward, we are not only building, we are also fighting. So life is both a battle and a building program. There is no conquest without a contest. It's just the way life is. What Nehemiah did was to go about the task he had at hand with the sword in one hand and the shovel in the other. In addition to the gift that God has given us to build our lives, we must also understand how to defend ourselves against those who will try to distract us or stop us.
Yes.
I mean, you will have thought that was enough a problem for him. There's the Sambala, the Tobias, and the external detractors.
Yes, and they created enough evidence to discourage the people. Because reading that story in Nehemiah chapter 4, I saw that they were dumping things so that it looked as if they were not making progress. And sometimes in life, you are working so hard and you're just wondering, it's like I'm not making progress. Things are just not appearing. But then you need to build up your faith and know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You must come to that light at the end of the tunnel.
You know what really strikes me again here was the fact that there are some internal problems as well. Because sometimes we are quick to recognize external problems, but sometimes some of the most challenging situations are situations that are within the camp itself, within the family itself. So you find here now in chapter 5 of this book, some of the returned exiles were suffering at the hands of corrupt government officials. These are within the Jews themselves now, and some of these officials were either Jews who had become wealthy in exile and brought their wealth with them to Jerusalem, or descendants of Jews who had arrived earlier under Zerubbabel and established lucrative businesses. And what began to happen was that wealthy Jews would lend large sums of money. When the debtors missed a payment, they would take over the field, leaving the debtors with no source of income. And these poor people were often forced to sell their children into slavery, which was the common practice at that time.
Yes.
And Nehemiah stopped this. Nehemiah got quite angry at this practice. He rebuked these officials. He sorted out that internal problem. He defended the poor. He insisted on fairness to the poor and the oppressed. And he said, look, he instilled this as God's heart, that this is central to following God. If you claim to love God, you have to you have to love people. You have to fight.
The people you can see.
You have to fight for the oppressed. And this is Nehemiah told the rich Jews to stop charging interest on loans to needy brothers, because God never intended people to profit from other people's misfortune. As far as he was concerned, caring for one another is more important than personal gain.
And that is a sign of a wise leader. Because if he didn't tackle the issues of internal strife, they can't press on to succeed against the external enemies.
Yes.
And one thing he said that I liked, and it's given me a lot of food for thought, is in that chapter 4 verse 14, when he told the people, he said, be not afraid of them. Be not afraid of them.
Exactly.
And then he said, remember the Lord, who is great and terrible. Remember the awesomeness, the majesty of God, the one whom you trust, the one whom you believe. Apart from your efforts, apart from what we have put together, look up.
Remember the source.
Look up.
You're right. The first key to overcoming challenges in life and intimidation is to refuse to fear.
Yes.
Because God will often use people and use circumstances to prepare us to fulfill his purpose for our lives.
And he even told them, he said, fight for your brethren, fight for your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. And that's just about building up our homes, building up our friendships, building up our relationships.
Yeah. The one purpose of intimidation is to break down things, to make us change our focus. The root of intimidation itself is fear. And once you entertain fear, it will cause you to lose focus, cause you to focus on yourself. And the Bible says that perfect love casts out fear.
And it's
because fear, love puts the focus on God and on others and a goal that is higher than self.
Well, this is so true, and it really matters to me now, because when you look at the issues of cyberbullying, trolls, and all that, we need to encourage people that they don't need to fear and they shouldn't be intimidated online.
Yeah. The terrible thing about intimidation is that intimidation actually causes the gift in a person to begin to malfunction. and leads to confusion, loss of confidence, and depression.
Some young people don't even go to school.
Instead of facing the fears, when intimidation grips, frustration comes in, and people feel they have let themselves down, hopelessness sets in, and eventually people settle down for less than what they actually are able to do. Listener, I want you to know that every challenge wants to attack your confidence in yourself and displease you. You are more than that. The same way Nehemiah resisted intimidation. If you want to function at your peak, if you want the gift that God has given you to find expression, and I want you to know, no matter who you are, you have a gift. There is no one that is not blessed. You may not have the same gift as someone else, but you have your gift. And what intimidation does, and what ridicule, and what people who want to use sarcastic remarks to put you down, what they are trying to do is to stop your gift from finding expression. Someone said, as long as a person doesn't know what he or she doesn't know, he or she never grows. And so many lives remain trapped in obscurity by fear and intimidation, and they don't have a chance to know how much talent and potential they actually have. Nehemiah refused to submit to fear and intimidation. You must also decide, and I hope and I pray as you're listening this morning that you can make up your mind not to rob the world of your talents and the rich treasures that are within you, but decide to bless it with that rich, valuable, potent and untapped resources that are locked away within you. You are always more than what you have done. There's this story of Abraham Lincoln. I read, it was within this week, about this group of political scientists who vote regularly every 4 years, and they have consistently voted Abraham Lincoln as the greatest president of the United States who ever lived. But people forget the dramatic story of his life. He was a man who actually struggled all his life to release the wealth of potential that was locked up inside him.
He never gave up.
He never gave up. He lost his job in 1832, and then he was elected to the legislature in 1834. He suffered the death of his sweetheart in that same year, 1834. He suffered a nervous breakdown in 1836. He was defeated for Speaker of the State Legislature in 1838. He was defeated again for nomination for Congress in 1843. He was elected to Congress eventually. And then he was rejected for position of land officer in 1849. He was defeated for Senate in 1854. He was defeated for nomination for Vice President of the United States in 1856. He was again defeated for the Senate in 1858. And then he was elected President of the United States in 1860. What tenacity. What focus. What stick-to-itiveness. And that is what makes for life. This is what Nehemiah was as tenacious as Abraham Lincoln. He refused to quit. He relied on God. He reinforced his weak points, because sometimes when we face criticism, we should also do self-examination. It's important to do self-examination to make sure that, your criticisms are not well-founded. Maybe you might be thinking, listener, well, this man Nehemiah, it's good for him. He knew how to work hard. He was disciplined and all that. I'm not like that. So where do I start? I want you to know that no one begins life instantly knowing how to do these things.
Yes.
To become disciplined, to have people skills, to be persistent, to be persevering, and so on. But these are things that you can learn. I love this quotation from Zig Ziglar. He said, a truly successful person is someone who possesses some things money can buy and everything money cannot buy. He said, wealth is the total of what you have that money cannot buy and death cannot take away. Wealth is the total of what you have that money cannot buy and death cannot take away.
Indeed.
And that is who you are becoming, who you are. What are your strong convictions? What is your vision? What is your sense of identity? Once you know where you are going, you have the power to overcome every challenge and intimidation.
The story of knowing where you're going. I read a story about Albert Einstein, and he was on a train going somewhere, and then the ticket master came on board and asked for his ticket, and Einstein couldn't find his ticket, and he kept searching, and the man said, "Oh, don't worry, we all know you," and then left him. And then the man came around again, going on to some other passengers, but he found Einstein was still searching under the seats everywhere, and the man said, "No, we know you, don't bother." And he said, "Yes, I know me, but I need to know where I am going."
Exactly. There's power in vision.
You must know where you are going.
If you don't know where you are going, your challenges will show you where to go. You see, a life with a clear vision is what provides the motivation that drives and energizes us towards success and overcoming challenges. And I want to talk a little bit here about the power of imagination, because a life's vision is a product of mind and imagination. Nehemiah had never been to Jerusalem, but in his mind's eye, he envisioned the walls rebuilt. He saw it ahead before he went to do it. And so I want you to know that until your mind and your imagination can fashion a great tomorrow, you may not arrive there.
That's why Jesus went
Imagination will empower you to project into the future and into the mind of God for his divine counsel for you.
Very true. Very true. That scripture, I think it's one of your favorite scriptures that you always say, that but for the joy of the glory that was laid ahead of him,
he endured
the cross. Because this is the season where Christians celebrate all that Jesus went through. He endured the cross. He despised the shame. I mean, the people he ministered to now mocking him, now spitting on him, wearing the crown. And he said, "Look, I could call down a legion of angels. I could call down support, but I'll go through this because I know where I'm going. Yes. I know my purpose." So sometimes the mockeries, the beatings, the losses, financial losses, the embarrassment sometimes, and sometimes the humility of having to go and apologize and make up with somebody you have wronged or who presumes you have wronged them, just to maintain peace.
It's all part of this process.
It's all part of this process we are talking about today.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important to understand that most entrepreneurs and most people who succeed in business actually exercise this gift. Your imagination is important to play a very crucial role in overcoming the challenges you will face in life and enter into the greatness that God has reserved for you. I believe that with every conception, there's a commission. With every child that is born into this world, there's a potential for greatness. In every seed, there's a potential to become a tree. And imagination has the ability to begin to draw you into the things that you imagine. So imagination not only creates vision, it also creates the expectation. Nehemiah, in this story, he led this entire construction project, but he did not live as a bureaucrat in a well-guarded office. He was hands-on. He was a hands-on leader. He got involved in the day-to-day work. He did not use his position to take advantage of his people, because what a good leader does is it keeps in touch with the work that is being done. And those who lead well lead by what they do as by what they say.
Remember, you said something before we bring in the music now, that about for every conception there is a commission. And for every commission, if this will encourage you, dear listener, there is a provision. I just quickly remind you, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And you can email us on info@sci.org.uk. Or you can make a phone call. The landline is 0191 548 1848. And it's even much easier if you just go to the website, because then you can get all the information you need, and you can also contact us online via Facebook, through the Twitter, www.scli.org.uk. Also, please feel free to join the interactive Bible study on this subject, which we have been looking at for this past 4 episodes. So we'll round up today, just bringing to your notice again some key features about courage in the face of fire, courage in the face of challenges. And I just want to remind our listeners this morning, as you enter into this new week, the Lord God Almighty knows your discouragement too. Whatever you are going through, take a moment to pray. Remember, we talked about prayer. And then keep moving forward. Keep doing the work God has given you to do. Prayer is your first obligation, not your last resort. And remember who is the Lord. Rest in his power and love, for he alone is great and awesome. Don't quit. The glory is ahead. Have a wonderful week. From
Peter
and Theodora.
Maximize your life.
Created for changes, chosen for greatness. All things are possible. Be all you can be in Christ. Maximize your life. Maximize your life. All things are possible.